Okay, we're good to go. Okay, good morning everyone and welcome. I'm Afta, Global VP Customer Solutions, and I've been working at Partnerize now for over 5 years. But like many of you in this room today, I've been in this industry a lot longer. And in that time, and going even further back, affiliate and partnership marketing has relied on a fairly simple principle. If something can be clicked, it can be tracked. And if it can be tracked, it can be rewarded. But AI is rapidly changing that model. Today, influence is increasingly happening inside machine-mediated journeys, often without clicks, links, or traditional attribution. Yet our measurement systems are still built for a click-first world, leaving genuine value unseen and unrewarded. The challenge that our advertisers or our ecosystem faces today is that consumer influence hasn't really disappeared. It's just become less visible. And if our measurement systems are still designed for a click-first world, then there's a real risk that advertisers are making commercial decisions based on incomplete data. Consequently, our ecosystem is slowly undermined by the very relationships it depends on. Today, we're asking what it takes to fix that. Not with incremental tweaks, but with a genuine rethink of the measurement and compensation infrastructure for this new era. And to do that, I'm delighted to be joined by these three brilliant panelists who bring a perspective from across the industry, an advertiser, agency, and a publisher view. And on that note, let's get our panelists to introduce themselves. Anira, if you'd like to go first, please.
Hi, I'm Anira. I'm head of partnerships at Love Holidays. I've spent the last 15 years leading growth teams across various industries, scaling brands through full funnel strategies and marketing innovation.
Ed Hutchinson here from The Independent. I'm head of retail media solutions, so responsible for the commercial teams looking after all CPA, CPC, CPL and flat fee revenues. I've been in media, digital and customer acquisition for over 15 years. Spent some time at The Guardian and Future, and really excited to be here to talk about this topic.
Morning everyone, I'm Louis, I'm from Acquire. We are an affiliate-first performance marketing agency. We specialise in managing luxury, fashion, beauty and lifestyle brands. I've been in this industry for over 12 years, scaling global brands, particularly focused in affiliate partnerships and influencer marketing.
Wonderful stuff. Okay, let's jump straight into the questions. And a bit of a scene setter to start with. Then, for years, affiliate marketing has relied on the click as the primary proof of value. What are you already seeing in consumer journeys today that tells you influence is happening long before or completely without that click? Anira, be good to start with a brand perspective.
Of course. So I think we've all historically known that the click is not telling us the full story. It's just been the easiest thing to track and to measure. AI has compressed journeys and hidden much of them. And so there's increased urgency in making sure that we evolve that attribution model and overlay other data to ensure we're making the best investment decisions in order to sustain growth. We're seeing at Love Holidays, using tools like Vantage Point, we can see that for every one last click tracked conversion, there are actually 43 happening untracked. And so that creates an exceptional level of urgency and really points us in the direction of understanding what is influencing those AI-driven journeys, who are those partners showing up in the LLM citations, and really leaning into those relationships in a way that we historically have not previously.
Great, and from your perspective, Louis, and an agency lens, what are you seeing within consumer journeys?
Yeah, just to add and to echo Anira's point, I think this isn't a new problem. We've seen this for a long time in affiliates. We've all relied on CPA and last click for the 20 plus years of affiliate marketing, and I think that's created this blind spot that we're experiencing, and I just think that the LLM gap is widening that, and we're seeing up to 65% of customer purchases not being attributed or not having a click. And I think that's because, and sort of going back to Elliot's point when he's talking about customer journeys in Profound, or what they're seeing in Profound, is that we're seeing a huge shift of consumers searching for or using queries for searching for new products or new brands, getting a result, despite never even heard of a brand, they'll purchase straight away. And I think that is shrinking that purchase journey. It leaves brands very disillusioned because they don't really know where this traffic is coming from, and the consumers are, without doing their own research now, relying on LLMs to give them the perspective of where to purchase from. Great,
and from a premium publisher perspective, the independent, you've obviously seen a lot of change, I guess, over the last 6 and 12 months when it comes to consumer journeys. What's your experience telling you, Ed, on this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's any content publishers in the room, you'll agree that we've often lost out to last click. So yeah, it's not a new problem for us. I think there are two things for us that kind of illustrate the challenge that we've had. And also, going back to your point about where influence is happening well before the click. So we did a study of our audience last year, and it showed, among the many things it showed, that 78% of our audience is coming to us looking for shopping inspiration. So these are people who are in market, they're looking to buy a new pair of trainers, a new coat, an air conditioning unit maybe, but they don't know what they want to buy. So they're coming to us looking for inspiration, looking for our journalists who they trust to make a recommendation on the product they should buy that's within their budget. And so clearly that's having a big influence on the decision they're going to go make. And then we're also seeing in our affiliate data that we get commissions on probably only between 70 to 80% of the journeys that the independent is involved in. And actually that falls to as low as 50% for travel. So clearly there's a gap there, and we are having a big impact on those conversions, but it's not being recognized. So yes, it's not a new problem for us, but obviously AI is really accelerating and shining a light on this issue.
Great, thanks. So a recognition issue that you've touched on. Next question, from your respective views, what types of partner influence are currently creating commercial value but remaining systematically under-recognized or undercompensated? Follows nicely what you've said there, Ed. But Louis, I'll start with you. Acquire being an agency that works with a lot of fashion and beauty premium brands, and I guess the kind of partner tilt would be more towards that upper funnel partners. How are they being impacted? I guess they are being impacted more from your perspective.
Yeah, really expanding on Ed's point there. As a manager of affiliate programs and working with luxury brands, it's very easy to rely on the last click and inflating CPA rates to incentivize content partners like Ed, but as he's clearly pointed out, they're not being rewarded or compensated fairly. 25% of nothing is nothing. So it's not fair. So I think we're really trying to shift and have been shifting that approach and working towards more hybrid models, so fixed fee plus percentages to really compensate fairly. And I think that should be a bit of a gold standard for all affiliate marketeers, especially if you want to build credible relationships with partners like the independent, for instance. I think as well, just another user group that we focus on quite a lot at Acquire when we work with sort of luxury brands and fashion and beauty brands is building out UGC communities. I think building an army of influencers is super powerful. Creating authentic, genuine content is really credible for brands, and at scale is very cost effective because they're usually brand fans and want to work with the brands and not looking for inflated costs to work with you. So I think that's a really positive shift that we're seeing brands moving into for cost efficiencies, but then also for that value. And I think if we kind of flip the question a bit there, Aftab, as well, if we look at, rather than looking at undercompensating, if we're looking at partners that are being overcompensated as well, I think we're all quite aware of the question of incrementality when it comes to last click for incentive partners, the sort of goal-hanging partners, for want of a better term. I think it's really hard to prove incrementality if you've got a best-in-market voucher code and then you supplement that with a homepage feature. So I think we should be really moving some budget to start testing the theory and compensating fairly the upper funnel, where we are happy to just readily invest into higher ROI drivers that potentially aren't as incremental. So again, it's that shift in value. Do we want just pure last click? Do we want pure high ROI? But how are we going to grow that? How are we going to supplement that without the demand generation from content partners? Need some budget.
Great, thank you very much, Louis. And Ed, compensating fairly is what Louis says there, but what's your kind of thoughts in terms of the independent being undercompensated and under-recognized? Again, in terms of what you probably experienced over the past 6 to 12 months, but what are you seeing internally?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm going to say content publishers are under-recognised, not just the Independent, Telegraph, Reach PLC, and so on. I think the key thing is, our main currency is trust, and trust takes a long time to build, but it could be lost in a second. So that's why, we need to, we're obviously very cognizant of the ASA and making sure we're labelling content appropriately. So it's not as simple as saying, yes, pay flat fees to content publishers, and then it's going to appear in the LLMs, because actually we've got to make sure we're labelling things properly and being transparent with our readers, because if we're not, that's where the trust erodes, and then that's where the LLMs won't start picking our content to feature. Putting a value on trust, something intangible like trust, is really hard. But what I do think is it creates a halo effect for the brands that we feature, right? And you only have to look at a lot of the e-com sites. They will use, for their trust signals to help conversion rates, they will use the logos of content publishers like the Independent, like the Telegraph, and so on. So intuitively, we know the value's there, but yes, getting to actually a compensation model that recognises that is the question we're trying to answer.
I totally agree with Ed, and I was just going to add that I think there's a synergy between all of the voices that are influencing the LLMs, whether it be communities or creators or publishers. They are trust businesses, and trust is what drives decision making, not clicks. So we are measuring the wrong thing if we're measuring clicks in isolation. We do need to overlay with other signals what's driving influence, what's influencing purchase decisions.
Sure.
And that's become more difficult than ever because, to the panel previously, that's happening in one environment without a click and is seemingly invisible to the marketeer, which is
absolutely
a challenge. But thanks to Vantage Point and Profound, we're able to look under the hood of those LLMs and see what's influencing those purchase decisions and look at new compensation models to ensure that we're at least pivoting in the right direction to reward these voices fairly. We know that we need to invest in great content in order to feed these machines and make sure that they are delivering consumer value and brand value. And so I think, we're on the horizon of change.
great. And it leads us nicely into the next question, touching on kind of fairly compensating and measurement. But as AI-mediated discovery becomes more common, where do you think the current measurement model breaks down most significantly for brands, agencies, and publishers? And Ira, if you continue, I'd like to go with you there first. Where do you think the current measurement model breaks down?
I think there are probably two parts to that question. The first one is specifically around measurement, and the second one is probably around organizational structures. So in terms of measurement, I think we've just become fully hooked on the click, and that is the click is biased, whether you're working in a first touch model, a last touch model, a weighted multi-touch model, the click is biased and it's not telling you the full story. So if you are only looking at click metrics, you are limiting your ability to scale. At Love Holidays, what we're doing is we're looking to evolve our measurement framework to pull in other signals, whether it be Vantage Point data, impression data, MMM data, and critically, incrementality testing data as well. An engineer doesn't ship a bunch of code once a quarter. We know we need to continuously experiment, particularly in this rapidly changing world. AI is increasing the velocity of change faster than ever. And so we know what is true today isn't necessarily true tomorrow. And so that pressing need for continuous optimization, continuous experimentation, is really urgent. But I think looking at multi-signals and not just clicks in isolation has to be the answer to unlock growth.
Great, thank you very much, Naira. And Louis, your thoughts on that? Being a click-only or taking a click-only view clearly presents challenges for Naira. What would you say from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a unique position as an agency where we work with multiple brands and have visibility across multiple channels, but it's still surprising how many brands still rely on GA4 as their single source of truth. And we totally appreciate why that is, because it's easy and it's credible, but it doesn't tell the full picture. And I think, to Anara's point there, we need to shift that, and a lot of the work that we're doing at Acquire is, we are an affiliate agency, but we're really challenging brands to think holistically. We're not just looking at driving the affiliate channel growth, we want to grow the brand as a whole. And I think if we're looking at one source of truth and it's not telling us the full picture, then we're stumbling at the first hurdle. So, looking at, MMM models, utilizing tools like Vantage Point and Profound, for instance, is giving us that really broad spectrum. It's still, we still have to piece all these pieces of data together, and it requires a team to do that. And, that's a good challenge. But I think unless we start that challenge, brands are falling behind. And then just to add on that is the compensation model. That's where this breaks down again. If we can't distinguish where the influence is coming or who provided the value for that purchase, then we're not rewarding or compensating our partners fairly. And I think that's a big challenge.
Great stuff. And from your perspective, at the independent ed, where do you think the current measurement model is breaking down? Lou's obviously touched on compensation. I guess being pulled into these citations all well and good, but if there's no click, then obviously a publisher like independent is impacted. But what's your thoughts on the current measurement model and its limitations?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for content publishers, the click is disappearing entirely. I think we heard from Elliot in the previous session. People are doing their research in ChatGPT and then opening another tab and going to the merchant to make a purchase. So clearly, even if we are cited and we're mentioning your brand, the brand isn't seeing that we're the one driving that value for them. So that's obviously a big issue. So I think, and Jeff was talking about aligning on a set of standards. That's very much where we need to get to as an industry. As you sort of hot off the press, we just got access in our GSC to AIO impression data, and we're seeing that Indie Best of all the pages across and all the sections across the independent has the highest share of impressions going to AIOs. I think it's something like 33% of our impressions in Google or Indie Best is going to AI overviews. And actually, it's the biggest share amongst the whole of the independent. So I think that sort of speaks to the challenge we've got in our shopping channel, where we have traditionally monetized through last click CPAs. That's, a third of that has gone, essentially.
Absolutely. Great. Next question then. There's a tension between rewarding upper funnel influence and maintaining efficiency, governance, and brand control. How do you build compensation models that recognize influence without creating incentives for low quality or overly aggressive tactics? Anara, if you could take that one first.
I think balance is critical. We have built performance marketing with really rigorous commercial frameworks and testing frameworks, and I think we don't want to lose sight of that. We need to include that. Just because measurement is more difficult, it doesn't mean that rigor goes away.
Okay. Louis, on your side, again, spoken already about the brands that you work with. I guess governance is quite important given that they are at that kind of premium end.
Yeah, definitely. Governance is first on our agenda when we manage any affiliate program or manage any brands. I think, starting with a credible source and reliable source of partners that can drive authentic traffic is super, super important. And I think that's why we're sort of having this conversation today. And, we've spent a lot of time in this industry, and I certainly have, building the authority of affiliates and trying to change the narrative that affiliates isn't just the last click discount channel. We work again with a lot of luxury brands and prove that concept in action by building content strategies, influencer strategies, etc. And that's super important. And I think it's quite easy for brands at this time anyway to start taking shortcuts or testing poorly. We're seeing vendors offering things like citation stuffing, which if people aren't aware of, it's basically just cheating the system to get presence within LLMs. But if the user then clicks through, they'll not see the brand being mentioned because it's actually been sort of a screen. And I think that creates, again, another disillusionment for customers. If I was shopping and I was looking for that aircon unit and I saw that this brand was mentioned as a top aircon provider and I clicked through and it wasn't even featured on that page, I would lose a lot of trust. So I think brand equity is super important when it comes to doing this. And I think, again, not taking shortcuts is super important. Having a really refined strategy, again, very, very important for brands.
And from your perspective, Eric, obviously, brand trust is something that you focus very heavily on, but what's your thoughts on the question?
I think, yeah, firstly, the old adage, content is king, still rings true. Google has long valued high-quality content, well-researched content. Their EEAT framework is still very relevant for the LLM, AIO, answer engine world we now live in. And that's, working with trusted third-party sources, it's consistency of message about your brand, it's real-world experiences in the content. So at Indie Best, we test every product that we write about, and we show that we get hands-on with the product. It gets a bit more tricky with things like solar panels and double glazed windows, but we do our best. So yeah, our content is key. Quality content is key, and I guess what we need is brands who recognise that and are willing to invest in us. And going back to my point about sort of labelling, that's a thing we're sort of grappling with at the moment. In terms of that compensation model piece, we're doing a number of different things at the moment. We've worked with a number of different brands in different ways. Firstly, we need to already be writing about the category your brand is, because that shows that we've got authority in that space and we're more likely to get picked up in the LLMs. And then it's about, dare I say, not creative accounting, but getting creative with how we structure what that engagement looks like. And I think the work Vantage Point is doing, moving towards a hybrid model, cost per influence,
Sure.
as well as flat fees, is a direction of travel. And yeah, we're very much leaning into that.
I completely agree, actually. I think we're not in a position where we're doing a handbrake turn on CPA models. I think CPA models still have a place. Different voices, different publishers, depending whether they're demand capture or demand creation, should probably have a different commission model. And I think it's about playing with those different models, working with partners where consumers are increasingly outsourcing their decision-making to these trusted voices, as is AI. So making sure that you're leaning into those relationships and working with the publisher to define what models work best. We're not going to land on a perfect outcome straight away. Like, that's absolutely imperative to understand from the outset. But we are going to find our way to something that works more holistically for everyone at the table.
Okay, great. So next question, for premium and travel brands especially, customer consideration journeys can be long, fragmented, and emotionally driven. What proxy signals or hybrid measurement approaches do you believe are most credible when direct attribution is incomplete? And Ira, from a kind of a travel perspective, I love holidays. Again, customer consideration journeys can be long. What's your thoughts on that question?
Well, I think AI has been incredible for the consumer, and we're marketeers, we're thinking about the consumer, right? It's such a life hack to be able to move through what was once a month-long journey of decision-making and comparison, to be able to find an outcome on the best holiday for you within moments. Like, that's incredible. For marketeers, it presents an enormous challenge because it's practically invisible, and we're still using the traditional attribution models of old, which just don't recognize that pathway. So we're, as I mentioned previously, looking at various different sources of data to kind of close the loop and to make sure that we're looking through those lenses to define the best outcomes, because we know if we invest in the channels that are influencing decisions and not just influencing clicks, then we are going to sustain our growth.
Okay, great. And Louis, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think Sean sat right in the front there, had a great stat on a previous event where he said Vantage Point has shown that 30 to 60% of affiliate journeys are being under-attributed. And I think for a luxury brand where the consumer might have 20 plus touch points because the consideration phase is much larger, that represents a massive problem for us if we can't distinguish and track that traffic. I think, if we look at, TikTok, for instance, and in the beauty space, trends come and go really quickly. Ingredients might come into focus overnight. And I think, as you would do if you were a PPC manager, you would implement a keyword strategy straight away to try and capture some of that traffic and demand. I think the same thing with affiliate. We're in this unique position where, we can work with the likes of Linkbee, for instance, to be super reactive and create content to support those keywords. Or then a sort of a long-term piece as well, working with the independent, et cetera, to build those credible sources of traffic. And I think just a last point on this one as well, we spoke as a team internally because we're looking and talking about data and crunching the numbers, et cetera, a lot. And I think there's a lot to be said about actually asking customers how they got there and what they actually believe. I think a lot of brands spend a lot of time, and as a performance marketing person as well, we're spending a lot of energy acquiring new customers, but a lot of the time we don't even know how they got there. We're just making assumptions based on the data. So I think there's a really big part to play in, doing post-purchase surveys for customers to really get the qualitative data we need, to then go to the CFO and say, we've got, this percentage of customers coming from this channel or this traffic source. Should we double down and start testing that and putting that into practice? So I think that qualitative data is something that we sometimes forget to look for because we're so ingrained in the numbers trying to tell the story.
Great. Focusing on the data from your point or perspective, Louis. And Ed, to finish off on that question, what would you like to add?
Not too much else. Completely agree with both Anira and Louis here. But again, going back to what Elliot was talking about, I think there's a convergence of disciplines happening, and what AI is doing is, for the affiliate industry, we need to start thinking sort of in PR terms, so brand sentiment, purchase intent, obviously increases in website traffic. I think you've talked about that. You've seen that happening, showing up more in the LLMs, and then seeing spikes in direct traffic, so unexplained direct traffic. So I think that sort of convergence of those marketing disciplines and understanding how it's being measured in those spaces is something we need to get sharper on in an affiliate space.
Okay, great. On to the penultimate question. So what organizational changes need to happen internally for brands to move from campaign-based affiliate tracking to a more persistent infrastructure approach to influence measurement and partner valuation? Anira, if you could take that one first.
Yeah, well, I think this is the most critical thing, right? There's a huge organizational shift that needs to happen, as well as a mindset shift. And I think we do need to break down the silos of old. The previous panel spoke about it as well. Yeah. This is affecting SEO teams, PR teams, affiliate teams, and we are stronger when we work together. Consumers don't see or experience marketing by channel and by silo, and neither does AI. Budgets shouldn't follow org charts, they should follow outcomes. So the faster we can move to work more collaboratively on shared outcomes and not channel metrics, the faster we'll succeed.
Great stuff. Louis, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that would be the gold standard, wouldn't it? If we were working towards one budget and we were working towards one goal. I think we've got a fair bit of the journey to come with that. But I think by talking about it, bringing it to the table, collaborating cross-team. Again, we work within affiliates, but we're constantly collaborating and championing that collaboration across team, across channel, to really bring this to the forefront and ensure that we are progressing, and breaking down those silos. And I think brands and companies need to react to this change. At Acquire, we've seen this change happening. We've created a new role, Laura, who's our head of strategy and innovation. She's our point person to ensure that we are, moving with the times, supporting our brands the best way possible, but then equally supporting our brand too. Having one central point of contact to analyze, interpret this data, and then share the learnings is really important. I think it's that old adage of too many cooks. AI is a hot topic right now, and brands and stakeholders are all jumping on it. And I think if you've got too many voices, it can distort the strategy and the trajectory of this. So again, we've got that one point person in-house who manages this for us. And I think all brands need to be doing that. You know, we heard Elliot talk about a team of engineers and a team of specialists and data insights people coming in to these top Fortune 100 companies, but you know, any company can do that. And I think that's a really immediate response that we need to be making.
Great stuff. I'm not sure, Ed, if you had anything to add to that, or we can move on to the last question. Yep, okay. We are out of time, but we'll move on to the final question. Bit of future gazing here to finish off with. But looking ahead to the next 2 to 3 years, what will separate the brands and publishers that successfully adapt to AI-shaped discovery from those still operating in a click-first mindset? Flip it and start with you, Ed, from a publisher perspective. What would you say to that final question?
Yeah, I think it's just about understanding which entities are being surfaced in the LLMs and ensuring you have the right to be in those environments. From a brand, that means quality products and services that review sites want to recommend. And then for publishers, it's about quality content, well-researched content. Yes, there are tactics like there were in SEO. White hat tactics, not black hat, that we're starting to learn about, and the way LLMs like to surface content. So of course leaning into that, but being writing for your audience and writing for humans.
Great stuff.
I can follow from that one.
Yeah, I can follow that, Louis.
So I think, looking back over the last sort of 5 years, coming to these conferences, it was always sort of influencer that took the keynote and was the most popular session because brands were reacting to trends and, trying to find newness. Whereas I think with AI and LLMs, this is a reality. Like, we have to be baking this into our strategy if we haven't already. And if you haven't already, you're sort of behind the times. So I think, not discrediting influencer, because it's obviously a huge part of what we do, but I think what I'm trying to say is this is more of like a cautionary tale. Brands were very reactive to throw money at influencer without really thinking about the strategy and long-term goals. So I think with this, with AI and LLMs, it's unifying and collaborating cross-channel, creating a cohesive strategy. Having a test and learn budget is super important because we're not then throwing money at it. We're not just attributing it to a last click or an ROI, which is obviously going to be very difficult to manage sometimes. So I think that's super important. And I think sort of lastly, if we're looking ahead of time now in the next couple of years, following up from what Elliot was saying from Profound, is these LLMs are crawling and searching for human content, authentic pieces of human content. And we were at the Open Attribution event last week, and they talked about model collapse, which is my new favorite term. It's where the AI bots start hallucinating because they're being starved of human content or authentic content. And I think if we are skipping corners or taking shortcuts with our content strategy, we're therefore actually losing traction long term. So I think again, working with credible partners, building authentic content, and delivering a strategy that we've created as a unified team is our best approach long term.
Great, and just to finish off with yourself, you've already spoken about the over-reliance on clicks and the need to move away from that, but what would you like to say just to finish off?
Yeah, I think history is littered with brands or businesses rather that have seen the future and have continued to operate in the past. Kodak, Nokia being perfect examples. Yeah. Kodak invented digital photography, but the commercial model didn't feel like it was there, and that business crumbled as a result of not pivoting. So I think, not to scaremonger, I understand it's hard to jump on a moving bus, but it's going to be much harder if you're 2 stops behind.
Great stuff. Okay, well that wraps up the session. It's been fascinating discussion. We are out about allotted time, but if there are any questions, and Ira, Ed, and Louis are around for the rest of the day, I think if there's one consolidated key takeaway is that this isn't a future problem. The zero-click era is already here. The shift to AI-mediated discovery is accelerating. There's no two ways about that. The gap between influence and compensation is also widening. The question is who will be the winners in the coming months? And the winners will be those that treat measurement and compensation as persistent infrastructure rather than ad hoc campaign tactics. I'd like to thank Anira, Ed, and Louis for their invaluable insights and contributions today.